Standing in my childhood bedroom at 28 years old, staring at my laptop screen showing nothing but empty folders, I felt my world collapse. 3 hours before the biggest meeting of my life, my parents had deleted my 400-page novel. My father stood behind me, arms crossed, his voice cold as winter steel. "Writers are just failed adults living in fantasy, Harry." My mother appeared in the doorway, adding the crushing blow that shattered what remained of my heart. "Your sister Jessica sells makeup and makes real money. Maybe it's time you grew up." 4 years of my life had vanished with the click of a button. But they had no idea my manuscript was already submitted and accepted for publication 2 weeks ago. The journey to this devastating moment began 6 years ago when I graduated from the University of Wisconsin with an English degree that my parents called expensive toilet paper. While my classmates landed corporate jobs or entered graduate programs, I returned to Denver and cycled through a series of soul-crushing retail positions. Target, Best Buy, Barnes, and Noble. Each paycheck barely covered my student loan payments, let alone the dream of financial independence that would allow me to write full-time. My parents Bob and Linda never missed an opportunity to remind me of my sister Jessica's success. She had built a thriving Mary Kay cosmetics business, earning what they claimed was 6 figures annually. Every family dinner became a showcase of Jessica's latest achievements. New car purchases, vacation photos from Cancun designer handbags that cost more than my monthly rent. The comparisons stung like paper cuts, small but persistent reminders of my perceived failure. Bob worked as an insurance agent for State Farm, spending his days selling policies to people who hoped they would never need them. Linda managed the front desk at a dental practice, scheduling appointments and processing insurance claims. They were practical people who believed in steady paychecks, retirement accounts, and the American dream of suburban stability. My writing represented everything they feared: uncertainty, impracticality, and the terrifying possibility of never achieving financial security. Despite their constant criticism, I couldn't abandon the stories burning inside my head. I developed a secret routine that became my lifeline. Every morning at 5 o'clock, I would slip out of the house and drive to a 24-hour diner called Mel's on Colfax Avenue. With a cup of coffee that cost $2 and unlimited refills, I could write for 3 hours before heading to whatever retail job currently employed me. The other customers were night shift workers, ending their day truck drivers grabbing breakfast, and insomniacs seeking the comfort of fluorescent lights and human activity. My novel, Echoes in the Static, grew slowly over 4 years of these dawn writing sessions. The story explored themes that felt achingly familiar. A young man trapped in a dysfunctional family dynamic, struggling to break free from expectations that suffocated his identity. The psychological thriller format allowed me to examine family manipulation through the lens of suspense, creating characters whose emotional wounds drove them to extraordinary actions. The breakthrough came 18 months ago, when I entered a writing contest sponsored by Writer's Digest. I submitted the first 3 chapters of Echoes in the Static with trembling hands and modest hopes. 3 months later, I received an email from Sarah Martinez, a literary agent from New York who specialized in psychological thrillers. She had judged the contest and wanted to read the complete manuscript. Sarah became my secret ally in a world that seemed determined to crush my ambitions. Our phone conversations happened during my lunch breaks, hidden in my car in parking lots behind whatever store currently employed me. She provided feedback that transformed my rough draft into a polished narrative, guiding me through revision after revision until the story sang with the kind of tension that kept readers turning pages at 2 in the morning. The calls from publishers began 6 months ago. Sarah had submitted Echoes in the Static to 12 publishing houses, and the responses surprised even her experienced expectations. Editors praised the authentic emotional depth, the realistic portrayal of family dysfunction, and the way psychological suspense emerged from everyday situations rather than contrived plot devices. 3 weeks before this crushing morning, my phone rang during a particularly difficult shift at Target. I was restocking the electronics section when Sarah's number appeared on my screen. I ducked into a storage room and answered with my heart pounding against my ribs. "Harry, I have incredible news," Sarah said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Thomas Caldwell from Pinnacle Publishing House wants to offer you a 3-book deal. We're talking about $150,000 with potential for movie rights if the first book performs well." I had to sit down on a box of printer cartridges to keep from collapsing. After 4 years of rejection, letters, dismissive comments from family members, and the constant struggle to balance writing with survival jobs, validation felt like winning the lottery and discovering the cure for cancer simultaneously. Sarah explained that Thomas would be in Denver the following week for a regional book fair, and he wanted to meet me in person to finalize the contract details. We scheduled the meeting for today, planning every detail carefully. I would tell my parents about the book deal after signing the contract, presenting them with irrefutable proof that writing could indeed provide financial stability and professional respect. But I needed to keep the news secret until everything was finalized. Publishing deals could fall apart over contract negotiations, and I couldn't bear the thought of announcing my success only to have it disappear like morning fog. The secret felt like carrying a winning lottery ticket in my pocket, knowing that my life was about to change in ways I had only dreamed possible. The discovery of my deleted manuscript felt like walking into my bedroom and finding that someone had burned down my childhood home while I slept. Every folder on my laptop was empty. 4 years of character development, plot refinement, and painstaking revision had vanished without a trace. My hands trembled as I checked external drives, cloud storage accounts, and email attachments, desperately searching for any backup that might have survived my parents' digital demolition. The emotional breakdown hit me in waves. First came disbelief, the kind of shock that makes you question your own senses. Surely there was some mistake, some technical glitch that could be reversed with the right software or expert assistance. Then anger crashed over me like a tsunami, hot and destructive, making me want to punch walls and scream until my voice gave out completely. But the worst emotion was the grief. I mourned those 4 years of 5 a.m. writing sessions, the countless hours spent crafting dialogue that felt authentic, developing characters whose psychological profiles I had researched with the dedication of a graduate student. The novel represented more than just a book. It was proof that I could create something meaningful, that my dreams had substance beyond wishful thinking. My parents found me sitting on my bed, laptop closed, staring at the wall where my high school diploma hung in a frame that suddenly seemed to mock every academic achievement I had ever earned. Bob entered first, his posture rigid with righteous conviction. Linda followed, her face set in the expression she wore when delivering bad news to dental patients about expensive procedures their insurance wouldn't cover. "We did what we had to do." Bob said, his voice carrying the tone he used with insurance clients who filed questionable claims. 4 years of this nonsense is enough. You're 28 years old, Harry. When I was your age, I owned a house and had a real career. Linda nodded, wrapping her arms around herself as if the conversation made her physically cold. "We're not trying to be cruel, sweetheart. We love you too much to watch you waste your life chasing something that's never going to happen. Jessica built her business from nothing, and now she's financially independent. She doesn't need us to support her dreams because she chose realistic goals." The comparison to Jessica hit like a physical blow. My sister had always been the golden child, the one who made practical decisions and achieved tangible success. Her Mary Kay business generated income that my parents could understand, products sold, commissions, earned tax returns that proved profitability. My writing generated rejection letters and submission fees, expenses, without measurable returns. "You canceled 4 years of work in 10 minutes. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Do you have any idea what you've done? Bob sat down in the desk chair where I had once completed homework assignments and filled out college applications. We've done you a favor, son. This writing thing was becoming an obsession. You're living in our house working retail jobs that barely pay minimum wage, spending every free moment on something that's never going to support you. How long were we supposed to enable this behavior? Before I could respond, Jessica's car pulled into the driveway. I heard her heels clicking on the front walkway, the sound of someone who had important places to be and professional responsibilities that mattered. She appeared in my bedroom doorway wearing a navy blue business suit and carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than I earned in 2 weeks at Target. What's going on? Jessica asked, reading the tension in the room with the skill of someone accustomed to managing difficult conversations with potential customers. Linda explained the situation with the kind of matter-of-fact tone she used to describe dental procedures. Cavity removal, root canal, novel deletion. Just another necessary intervention to prevent future problems. Jessica's reaction surprised me. Instead of immediately supporting our parents, she looked genuinely confused by the severity of their actions. You deleted his entire book. Couldn't you have just talked to him about finding a more stable job? For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope that someone in my family might actually understand the magnitude of what had been destroyed. But Jessica's next words extinguished that hope, like water on a campfire. I mean, I get why you're worried about him. She continued, setting her briefcase down and smoothing her skirt. I've been carrying the weight of being the only successful child for years. It's exhausting to be the one who made responsible choices, while Harry pursued this writing hobby. Maybe now he'll finally contribute to the family, instead of being a constant source of stress. The revelation that Jessica felt burdened by my failures added another layer of pain to an already overwhelming situation. I had always assumed she was oblivious to the comparisons focused on her own success, without considering how her achievements made me look like a disappointment by contrast. Learning that she actively resented my struggles felt like discovering that my childhood memories had been entirely fabricated. Bob stood up, checking his watch with the impatience of someone who had important business to conduct. Speaking of contributing to the family, I've arranged a job interview for you at my office this afternoon. 2 o'clock sharp. Regional manager position, $45,000 a year, starting salary, full benefits package. This is your chance to prove you can handle adult responsibilities. The timing was devastating in its cruel precision. 2 o'clock was exactly when I was supposed to meet Thomas Caldwell at his hotel to sign the publishing contract that would validate 4 years of work and transform my life completely. My parents had unknowingly scheduled my surrender for the exact moment when my victory should have been celebrated. I can't make a 2 o'clock interview today, I said, trying to keep desperation out of my voice. I have other commitments. Bob's laugh contained no humor whatsoever. Other commitments? Like what, another writing workshop where they charge you money to tell you that your hobby might someday become profitable? Those days are over, Harry. The fantasy ends now. That's when I discovered the full extent of my parents' sabotage. Bob pulled out his cell phone and showed me the call log, with a satisfied expression that made my stomach turn over. I took the liberty of calling that agent woman who's been filling your head with false hope. Told her you were withdrawing from representation due to a family emergency. She seemed disappointed, but said she understood that family comes first. The room started spinning as the implications became clear. Sarah had spent 18 months building relationships with publishers, negotiating on my behalf, positioning my book for success. Bob's phone call had potentially destroyed professional connections that had taken years to develop. Linda produced a stack of mail from her purse letters addressed to me that I had never seen. We've been intercepting correspondence from these publishing people for the past 2 months. Look at these return addresses. More rejection letters, more false hope, more people trying to take advantage of your dreams. We saved you the disappointment of reading them yourself. I recognized Sarah's agency letterhead among the unopened envelopes, along with official correspondence from publishing houses that had requested my manuscript. My parents had been systematically cutting off my communication with the professional writing world, isolating me from opportunities while pretending to protect me from disappointment. The cruelest revelation came last. Bob had contacted the publisher's office that morning, attempting to cancel my meeting with Thomas Caldwell. He had spoken with a receptionist claiming to represent me and requested that all future communication be discontinued due to my decision to pursue other career opportunities. As I sat surrounded by the wreckage of 4 years of work, listening to my family justify their destruction of my dreams, I realized that this wasn't impulsive anger or misguided concern. This was a calculated campaign to force me into the life they believed I should live, regardless of what I wanted or what I might actually be capable of achieving. The systematic nature of my parents' sabotage became clear as Linda continued pulling evidence from her purse like a prosecutor presenting a case. Bank statements, printed emails, and handwritten notes revealed the scope of their surveillance and intervention. They hadn't just deleted my novel on impulse. They had been planning this destruction for months, gathering intelligence and coordinating their attack with military precision. Linda had been reading my emails by accessing my laptop while I worked my retail shifts. She knew about every submission Sarah had made, every publisher response, and every revision deadline I had struggled to meet. The knowledge that my own mother had been violating my privacy for months felt like discovering that my bedroom walls were made of glass and the entire neighborhood had been watching my most private moments. "We found all those letters hidden under your mattress," Linda said, spreading out correspondence from literary magazines and small presses across my bedspread. Contest entry fees, submission guidelines, conference registration forms. "Do you realize how much money you've spent chasing this pipe dream money you could have been saving for a house down payment or a reliable car?" Bob pulled up a spreadsheet on his phone that detailed my writing-related expenses over the past 4 years. Entry fees, craft books, conference attendance, printing costs for manuscript submissions. The total was $837 money they viewed as completely wasted despite the fact that these investments had led to representation by a respected literary agent and interest from major publishers. $800 could have been the start of an emergency fund. Bob explained with the patience of someone talking to a financially irresponsible teenager. Instead, you threw it away on contests and workshops run by people who make their living off desperate wannabe writers. These people saw you coming from a mile away. The sound of a car door slamming interrupted Bob's lecture. Through my bedroom window, I watched Marcus Chen pull into our driveway in his Honda Accord, the same car he had driven since high school, but now maintained with the income from his successful graphic design business. Marcus and I had been friends since sophomore year, bonding over our shared love of creative pursuits that our parents viewed with skepticism. Marcus knocked on the front door, but Linda intercepted him before he could reach my room. I could hear their conversation through the thin walls of our ranch-style house, Linda explaining that I was dealing with a family situation and couldn't have visitors. But Marcus had never been easily deterred, and he possessed the kind of professional confidence that came from running his own business and dealing with demanding clients. "Mrs. Peterson, I'm actually here about Harry's writing," Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who billed $120 an hour for creative services. "I've been beta reading his novel, and I know how important today's meeting is for his career. If there's some kind of emergency, maybe I can help." The admission that Marcus knew about my publisher meeting sent Bob into immediate damage control mode. He realized that their carefully planned intervention might not remain a private family matter, and the possibility of outside judgment clearly made him uncomfortable. Bob valued his reputation in the community, and the last thing he wanted was neighbors gossiping about the Peterson family's dysfunction. Marcus entered my bedroom with the kind of calm assessment that had made him successful in client relations. He took in the scene quickly, me sitting on the bed surrounded by scattered papers, my parents hovering like guards, and the general atmosphere of confrontation that filled the small space like smoke. "What happened to your laptop?" Marcus asked, noticing the closed computer and my defeated posture. Before I could respond, Jessica answered with the blunt efficiency she used in business presentations. Mom and Dad deleted Harry's book to snap him out of this writing fantasy. They've arranged a real job interview for him this afternoon, and it's time he started acting like an adult. Marcus's expression shifted from confusion to genuine shock. As someone who had built a career in creative fields, he understood the value of artistic work in ways that my family never could. He also knew the specific details of my publishing opportunity because I had shared the good news with him under strict promises of secrecy. "You deleted 4 years of work?" Marcus asked, his voice carefully controlled but edged with disbelief. "Do you understand what you've done? Harry has talent that professional agents recognize. This isn't a hobby anymore." Bob stepped forward, asserting his authority as the homeowner and head of the household. "I don't know what Harry's told you about his little writing project, but we're the ones who see the reality of this situation. He's 28 years old, living in our house, working retail jobs that don't even provide health insurance. We can't enable this delusion any longer." "It's not a delusion," Marcus said, pulling out his phone. "Harry, show them the contract details." The request revealed a problem I hadn't yet shared with Marcus. The contract information was stored in email folders that no longer existed on a laptop that had been wiped clean of every file related to my writing career. I had been so focused on keeping the publisher meeting secret that I hadn't created backup copies of the essential documents in places my parents couldn't access. "I can't show them anything," I admitted. "Everything's gone." Marcus's face went pale as he understood the implications. "The publisher meeting is in 6 hours. Thomas Caldwell is flying back to New York tomorrow. If you miss this meeting, you lose the deal." Jessica looked between Marcus and me with growing suspicion. "What publisher meeting? What deal, Harry? Have you been lying to us about something?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. My parents had destroyed my work to prevent me from chasing unrealistic dreams, but they had no idea that those dreams had already come true. The irony was so bitter I could taste it on my tongue. Bob's phone rang before I could decide how to respond. He answered with the professional tone he used for business calls, but his expression quickly shifted to confusion and then anger. When he hung up, he turned to me with suspicion that made my stomach clench with new fear. "That was someone from Pinnacle Publishing House," Bob said slowly. "They're calling to confirm your meeting this afternoon with Thomas Caldwell. They said something about a 3-book deal and contract finalization." The silence that followed felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane, knowing that devastating winds were about to tear everything apart. My secret was out, but not in the triumphant way I had planned. Instead of celebrating my success, I was watching my parents realize that their intervention had potentially destroyed something far more valuable than they had understood. Linda sat down heavily in my desk chair, her face cycling through emotions too complex to name. "A 3-book deal, Harry. Are you telling us that you actually had a real publishing contract?" Before I could answer, Bob's phone rang again. This time he put the call on speaker, and Thomas Caldwell's voice filled my childhood bedroom like an announcement from another world. "This is Thomas Caldwell from Pinnacle Publishing. I'm trying to reach Harry Peterson about our meeting today. I received a call this morning from someone claiming to represent him, saying he wanted to cancel our contract discussions. However, his agent Sarah Martinez assured me that no such decision had been made. I'm hoping we can clear up this confusion because I'm very excited about his work." Bob stared at his phone as if it had spontaneously become a poisonous snake. The reality of what he had done was settling in like cold water through a cracked foundation, and I could see him beginning to understand that his protective intervention had backfired catastrophically. Marcus stepped into the silence with the kind of professional damage control that had saved many of his client relationships. "Mr. Caldwell, this is Marcus Chen, Harry's friend. There's been a family miscommunication, but Harry is absolutely interested in meeting with you today. Can we confirm the time and location?" "Certainly," Thomas replied, his voice carrying relief. 4 o'clock at the Marriott Downtown Conference Room B. I have the contracts ready for signature pending final discussion of a few minor details. Sarah speaks very highly of Harry's work, and I'm looking forward to bringing his novel to our readers. After Marcus ended the call, my bedroom felt like the aftermath of a tornado. Everyone stared at everyone else, trying to process the revelation that their reality had been turned completely upside down. I hadn't been chasing impossible dreams. I had been on the verge of achieving exactly the kind of success they claimed was fantasy. But the celebration would have to wait. Bob's interference with Sarah and the publisher had created professional complications that needed immediate attention. My parents had potentially damaged relationships that had taken years to build, and I wasn't sure if the harm could be completely undone. The worst part was realizing how close I had come to losing everything. If Thomas hadn't decided to call directly, if Sarah hadn't vouched for me, if Marcus hadn't arrived when he did, my parents' sabotage might have succeeded completely. The 3-book deal worth $150,000 could have vanished because of a family intervention designed to force me into selling insurance policies. The revelation that a real publishing deal existed sent my parents into a spiral of damage control that felt worse than their original sabotage. Instead of apologizing for deleting my manuscript, they began questioning the legitimacy of the offer, suggesting that publishers frequently took advantage of naive writers through elaborate scams designed to extract money from desperate hopefuls. These things are never what they seem. Bob insisted, his voice taking on the lecturing tone he used with insurance clients who didn't understand policy details. Publishers don't just call random people and offer huge contracts. There are always hidden fees, editing costs, marketing expenses that come out of your pocket. I've seen this kind of fraud before. Linda nodded enthusiastically, grasping onto any explanation that would justify their actions and protect them from admitting a catastrophic mistake. Remember your cousin David? He paid $2,000 to some company that promised to publish his cookbook, and all he got was a box of poorly printed books that he couldn't sell to anyone. The comparison was insulting on multiple levels. David's vanity publishing experience had nothing in common with my situation, but my parents needed to believe that all publishing opportunities were fraudulent, rather than accept that they had destroyed something genuinely valuable. Their denial was a defense mechanism protecting their self-image as wise parents who saved their son from making a terrible mistake. Marcus tried to explain the difference between legitimate publishing houses and vanity presses, but my parents weren't interested in education that contradicted their preferred narrative. They had committed to the story that I was being manipulated by sophisticated scammers, and no amount of evidence would shake their certainty. The scope of their interference became clear as Linda produced a folder filled with intercepted mail spanning the past 8 weeks. Letters from Sarah's agency correspondents from publishers, and even a check for $2,000 from a literary magazine that had accepted one of my short stories. They had been systematically cutting off my connection to the professional writing world, while convincing themselves they were protecting me from disappointment. "This check is probably fake," Bob said, examining the magazine payment with suspicious eyes. "These scam operations send fake checks to build credibility, then ask for money back claiming it was an accounting error. Classic fraud technique." Marcus examined the check and confirmed that it was legitimate, issued by a magazine with a 40-year publishing history. But Bob dismissed his assessment, claiming that Marcus was too young and inexperienced to recognize sophisticated fraud operations. The psychological impact of seeing my parents twist reality to avoid admitting their mistake was devastating. They had trained me to doubt my own perceptions throughout my childhood, dismissing my creative interests as phases that I would eventually outgrow. Now they were applying that same gaslighting technique to a situation where objective evidence contradicted their beliefs. Jessica remained silent during most of the confrontation, but her expression revealed internal conflict that she wasn't ready to voice aloud. As someone who understood business negotiations and professional relationships, she could see the legitimacy markers that my parents were choosing to ignore. but supporting me would require admitting that she had been wrong about my potential, and that acknowledgement threatened her identity as the successful sibling. The emotional toll of fighting for my reality while my family systematically dismantled it pushed me past my breaking point. The combination of grief over my deleted manuscript rage about the systematic interference and terror that I might lose the publisher meeting created a psychological storm that left me barely functional. I can't think clearly anymore. I told Marcus, who had become my only ally, in a room full of people determined to rewrite history. How am I supposed to go into a business meeting when my own family has spent the morning convincing me that nothing I believe about my life is real? Marcus suggested we leave the house and go somewhere quiet where I could process the situation without constant contradictions from my parents. But Bob blocked the doorway, asserting his authority as homeowner and demanding that I attend the insurance company interview instead of pursuing what he called this publishing house nonsense. If you walk out that door to chase this fantasy, don't bother coming back. Bob threatened, his voice carrying the kind of finality that had ended many arguments during my childhood. We've supported your writing hobby long enough. It's time to choose between family and delusion. The ultimatum was designed to force submission through fear of abandonment, a tactic my parents had used successfully throughout my adolescence. But at 28 years old, with professional validation waiting 4 miles away at a downtown hotel, the threat felt more liberating than frightening. Linda tried a gentler approach sitting on my bed and speaking with the tone she used to comfort dental patients facing painful procedures. Sweetheart, we love you too much to watch you get hurt by people who are taking advantage of your dreams. Come with us to the insurance interview. If this publishing thing is real, it will still be real next week. The suggestion revealed complete ignorance about how publishing contracts worked. Thomas Caldwell was in Denver for 1 day, returning to New York tomorrow morning. The contract had specific deadline requirements, and missing today's meeting would signal unprofessionalism that could easily result in a withdrawn offer. Marcus tried explaining the time-sensitive nature of publishing negotiations, but my parents had shifted into protective mode that blocked all information contradicting their preferred interpretation of events. They had decided I was being manipulated, and every piece of evidence supporting the deal's legitimacy was reframed as proof of how sophisticated the scammers had become. The most painful moment came when Jessica finally spoke her voice, carrying the disappointment of someone whose expectations had been systematically crushed. Harry, I've been telling people that my brother is finally growing up and getting serious about his career. If you embarrass the family by chasing this publishing fantasy, how am I supposed to explain that to my clients and friends? Her words revealed that she had already announced my transition away from writing to her professional network, positioning herself as the sibling who had successfully convinced her irresponsible brother to pursue realistic goals. My success would force her to admit that her business contacts that she had misjudged the situation, potentially damaging her reputation as someone who made sound assessments. The layers of family dysfunction that my novel had explored fictionally were playing out in real time in my childhood bedroom. Parents who believed they knew better than their adult children, siblings competing for limited approval and manipulation, disguised as love. The irony that my book deal validated the psychological insights that my family was determined to suppress felt like discovering that I had been living inside my own story without realizing it. Bob's phone buzzed with a text message that changed his expression from stubborn certainty to confused uncertainty. He read the message twice before speaking his voice, lacking its usual conviction. The regional manager at my office just texted me. He says the interview this afternoon has been moved to next week because the hiring committee needs to review more applications. The 2 o'clock slot isn't available anymore. The timing felt like divine intervention, removing the direct scheduling conflict between my parents' plan and my publisher meeting. But instead of accepting this development as an opportunity for compromise, Bob became more agitated, sensing that his leverage was slipping away. "Fine," Bob said, his voice tight with frustration. "If you're determined to humiliate yourself by chasing this scam, go ahead. But when these people ask you for money when the contract turns out to be fake, when you realize you've been played by professionals who exploit desperate writers, don't come crying to us for sympathy." Linda stood up from my bed with the rigid posture of someone who had made a difficult decision. "We're going to visit your Aunt Carol for the rest of the day. When we come back tonight, we'll discuss your living situation and what kind of financial support we're willing to provide for someone who refuses to accept reality." The threat was clear: pursue the publisher meeting and face potential homelessness, or abandon my dreams and retain family support. They were forcing me to choose between my artistic identity and my safety net, betting that fear would triumph over ambition. As my parents prepared to leave, Linda paused in the doorway with one final attempt at emotional manipulation. "I hope you understand that we're doing this because we love you, not because we want to hurt you. Sometimes love means protecting people from their own worst impulses even when they hate you for it." The statement encapsulated everything toxic about their approach to parenting. They had convinced themselves that sabotaging my career was an act of love, allowing them to maintain their self-image as caring parents, while systematically destroying my chances for independence and success. After they left, the house felt like a crime scene where something precious had been murdered. Marcus and I sat in the aftermath of the confrontation, trying to assess the damage and determine whether anything could be salvaged from the wreckage. "Your parents just threatened to kick you out for pursuing a legitimate career opportunity," Marcus observed, his voice filled with disbelief. "Do you realize how insane that is?" I did realize it, but understanding the dysfunction didn't make it less devastating. These were the people who had raised me, who claimed to love me more than anyone else in the world. Their willingness to destroy my dreams to maintain control revealed depths of selfishness that I hadn't wanted to acknowledge. The publisher meeting was still possible, but everything else in my life had been destabilized. My family relationships, my housing situation, and my emotional foundation had all been damaged potentially beyond repair. Victory in my professional life might come at the cost of losing my personal support system entirely. Sitting in the wreckage of my childhood bedroom, surrounded by scattered mail and deleted dreams, I realized that my parents had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible: absolute clarity about who I needed to become. Their ultimatum had stripped away every safety net, every excuse, and every reason to compromise my authentic self for their approval. Marcus closed my laptop and turned to face me with the kind of direct honesty that had made him successful in business. "Harry, you have 3 hours to decide who you want to be for the rest of your life. Are you going to be the person who lets family fear control your destiny, or are you going to fight for what you've already earned?" The question cut through months of self-doubt and years of internalized criticism. I had spent so much energy trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I was failure that I had forgotten to believe in my own achievements. A respected literary agent had chosen to represent me. A major publishing house wanted to offer me a 3-book contract. These weren't opinions or family assessments. They were objective professional validations of my work. "I'm going to that meeting." I said the words carrying more conviction than I had felt about anything in years. "Even if it costs me my family, even if I have to start over with nothing, I'm going to sign that contract." Marcus smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose faith in a friend had been vindicated. "Good. Now let's figure out how to make sure you're prepared for the most important business meeting of your life." The first challenge was recovering from the emotional devastation of the morning's confrontation. I needed to transform from a beaten-down son into a confident author, within 3 hours presenting myself as someone worthy of a significant publishing investment. Marcus suggested we leave the house entirely, creating physical distance from the scene of sabotage. We drove to a coffee shop in downtown Denver, that catered to business professionals and freelance workers. The environment was sophisticated enough to help me shift into a professional mindset, but casual enough that I wouldn't feel overdressed in the suit my parents had bought for the insurance interview. Marcus ordered us both large coffees and found a quiet corner table where we could plan my presentation strategy. Thomas Caldwell is flying back to New York tomorrow, which means he's genuinely interested in closing this deal today. Publishers don't waste time on authors they don't believe in. The reminder helped restore my confidence in the legitimacy of the opportunity. My parents' insistence that the contract was fraudulent had planted seeds of doubt, but Marcus's perspective as someone who regularly negotiated business deals provided reassurance that I was dealing with standard professional practices. What if Bob's phone call damaged my relationship with Sarah or the publisher? I asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at me since discovering the extent of my parents' interference. Marcus pulled out his phone and handed it to me. Call Sarah right now. Explain what happened. Apologize for the confusion and confirm that you're still completely committed to the deal. Professional relationships can survive miscommunications if you handle them honestly. Calling Sarah felt like stepping off a cliff, not knowing whether I would land safely or crash into the rocks below. But Marcus was right, that honesty was my only option. I dialed her number and waited through 3 rings that felt like hours. Harry. Sarah's voice carried relief and concern in equal measures. I got the strangest call this morning from someone claiming to represent you. He said you were withdrawing from representation due to a family emergency. I tried calling you back, but the number went straight to voicemail. I explained the situation as concisely as possible, outlining my parents' sabotage without dwelling on the emotional trauma. Sarah listened without interruption, occasionally making small sounds of sympathy and disbelief. Family dynamics can be complicated when creative careers are involved, Sarah said after I finished my explanation. I've seen parents who think they're protecting their children by discouraging artistic pursuits. The important thing is that you're still committed to your writing career and today's meeting. Her understanding and support felt like oxygen after nearly drowning. I'm absolutely committed. More than ever, actually. This morning showed me exactly why I need to build a career that doesn't depend on my family's approval. That's the attitude that will make you successful, Sarah said. Thomas is expecting you at 4 o'clock, and he's excited about your work. He specifically mentioned the authenticity of the family dynamics in your novel, which is ironic given what you're dealing with today. After ending the call with Sarah, I felt like a different person. The professional validation reminded me that my worth wasn't determined by my parents' assessment. I had skills that the market valued, talents that experts recognized, and opportunities that most writers would envy. Marcus helped me prepare for potential questions about my background, my other writing projects, and my career goals. We discussed contract negotiation basics, though Sarah would handle most of the technical details. My job was to present myself as someone worthy of the publisher's investment and excited about building a long-term professional relationship. The suit my parents had bought for the insurance interview fit perfectly a detail that felt like cosmic justice. I would use their weapon against my dreams as armor for my victory. The irony was so perfect that it almost made me laugh despite the emotional devastation of the morning. At 3:15, Marcus drove me to the Marriott downtown. The hotel lobby was filled with business travelers and convention attendees, people pursuing careers and opportunities that required them to travel across the country for important meetings. I belonged in this environment not behind a retail counter selling electronics to customers who treated service workers like furniture. "You've got this," Marcus said as I prepared to exit his car. 4 years of 5 a.m. writing sessions led to this moment. Your parents can't delete what you've already accomplished. Walking into the hotel felt like crossing a bridge from my old life into my future. The lobby was elegant without being intimidating, decorated with modern art that spoke to creativity and professional success. I found Conference Room B easily arriving 10 minutes early, as Sarah had advised. Thomas Caldwell was exactly what I had imagined a successful publishing executive would look like, mid-40s, wearing a well-tailored navy suit and carrying a leather briefcase that looked expensive enough to feed a family for a month. But his handshake was warm, his smile genuine, and his enthusiasm for my work immediately apparent. "Harry, it's wonderful to meet you in person," Thomas said, gesturing for me to sit across from him at a polished conference table. "Sarah sent me your revised manuscript last month, and I have to tell you, it's exactly the kind of psychological thriller that our readers are craving." He opened his briefcase and produced a contract that looked more substantial than any document I had ever been asked to sign. The Pinnacle Publishing House letterhead was embossed, the pages were printed on heavy stock paper, and every detail communicated the seriousness of the opportunity. "I understand there was some confusion about your availability this morning." Thomas continued his tone carefully neutral. "I'm glad we could clear that up because I'm very excited about this partnership." I decided that complete honesty was my best strategy. My family is still adjusting to the idea that writing can be a legitimate career. This morning was difficult, but it clarified my priorities completely. I'm absolutely committed to this opportunity and to building a long-term relationship with Pinnacle. Thomas nodded with understanding that suggested he had encountered similar family dynamics before. Publishing attracts people who are willing to work hard for uncertain rewards, and that commitment isn't always understood by people outside the industry. What matters is that you're here now, ready to move forward with your career. The contract details were more generous than I had dared to hope. 3 books over 5 years advance payments totaling $150,000 and royalty rates that would provide substantial income if the books sold well. There were also provisions for movie rights, foreign translations, and audiobook production. "This is life-changing," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I reviewed the terms. "I can't thank you enough for believing in my work." Thomas smiled with the satisfaction of someone who enjoyed discovering new talent. "I've been in this business for 15 years, and I know authentic voices when I encounter them. Your novel captures family dysfunction with psychological insight that most authors spend decades developing. We're not just investing in one book, we're investing in your potential for a significant literary career." Signing the contract felt like claiming my identity as a professional writer, rather than someone who merely hoped to become one someday. Each signature was a declaration of independence from every person who had ever suggested that my dreams were unrealistic or selfish. When the paperwork was complete, Thomas shook my hand again and handed me a business card with his direct contact information. "Sarah will coordinate the publication timeline and marketing strategy, but I want you to know that you can reach me directly if you have questions or concerns. We're partners now, and I'm invested in your success." Walking out of the hotel with a signed publishing contract in my briefcase felt like emerging from a cave into brilliant sunlight. The weight of 4 years' rejection letters, family criticism, and financial uncertainty had been replaced by professional validation and financial security that would allow me to write full-time. Marcus was waiting in the hotel bar, nursing a Coke and checking his phone. When he saw my expression, his face broke into a grin that lit up the entire room. "Let me guess," Marcus said, standing to shake my hand. "You're now officially a published author. 3 book deal advance payments, movie rights, the whole package." I confirmed, still barely believing the words were true. "I'm actually going to make a living as a writer." Marcus insisted on buying dinner to celebrate. But first we had to address the elephant in the room, my parents' ultimatum and my uncertain housing situation. The contract provided financial security, but it would take weeks for the first advance payment to arrive, and I needed somewhere to live in the meantime. "You can stay at my place until you find an apartment," Marcus offered without hesitation. "I've got a spare room, and honestly, it'll be fun having a real author as a roommate." The offer solved my immediate practical problem and provided emotional support during what was likely to be a difficult transition period. My family relationships were damaged, possibly beyond repair, but my future was secure in ways that I had barely dared to imagine. Returning to my parents' house with a signed publishing contract felt like entering a battlefield where I now possessed superior weapons. The psychological dynamic had shifted completely. I was no longer a failed adult child seeking approval, but a professional author with legitimate career prospects and financial independence within reach. Marcus insisted on accompanying me, recognizing that my parents might attempt further sabotage or emotional manipulation if I faced them alone. His presence provided witness protection against gaslighting and moral support during what was certain to be a difficult confrontation. Bob and Linda's car was parked in the driveway when we arrived, indicating that their visit to Aunt Carol had ended earlier than announced. Through the living room window, I could see them sitting on the couch with Jessica, their heads bent together in intense conversation that probably involved strategies for handling my rebellion against their authority. I knocked on the front door despite having lived in the house for 2 years, a symbolic gesture acknowledging that my relationship with my parents had fundamentally changed. Linda answered with the cautious expression she wore when dealing with potentially difficult dental patients. "Harry, sweetheart, we need to talk," Linda said, her voice carrying forced calm that couldn't hide underlying tension. "Please come sit down so we can discuss this situation rationally." Marcus and I entered the living room where my family had assembled like a tribunal, preparing to deliver judgment. Bob sat in his recliner with arms crossed. Jessica occupied one end of the couch with her business materials spread across the coffee table, and Linda gestured for me to sit in the chair opposite them. "We've been talking about this publishing business." Bob began, his tone suggesting that he had prepared talking points during my absence. "We did some research online, and we're more convinced than ever that you're being targeted by sophisticated scammers." Linda nodded enthusiastically, producing printed pages from various websites that warned about publishing fraud. "Look at these articles about vanity presses and fake agents who take advantage of amateur writers. The patterns match exactly what you're describing." Their research was impressively thorough but completely misdirected. They had found legitimate warnings about publishing scams and applied them to my situation with Pinnacle Publishing House, a respected company with decades of industry credibility. Their determination to prove fraud revealed desperation to avoid admitting their catastrophic mistake. Jessica looked uncomfortable with her parents' conspiracy theories, but seemed committed to supporting their position. "Harry, I called my friend Rachel, who works in marketing. She says that legitimate publishers never cold call unknown writers with massive contracts. The whole thing sounds too good to be true." The misunderstanding revealed how little my family understood about publishing industry practices. Sarah hadn't cold called me. I had submitted my work to a contest that she judged. The contract wasn't unsolicited. It was the result of 18 months of professional relationship building and manuscript development. "I have something to show you," I said, pulling the signed contract from my briefcase. "This is the 3-book deal with Pinnacle Publishing House. It's real, it's legitimate, and it's already signed." The sight of official legal documents printed on corporate letterhead created immediate silence in the room. Bob took the contract and examined it with the careful attention he applied to insurance policies, looking for loopholes or suspicious language that would support his fraud theory. "This could still be fake," Bob insisted, though his voice lacked its previous conviction. "Anyone can print official-looking documents. The real test is whether they actually send money or just ask for fees up front." Marcus stepped forward with his phone, pulling up Pinnacle Publishing House's website and showing my family the company's roster of successful authors, recent bestsellers, and industry awards. The evidence of legitimacy was overwhelming, but my parents continued grasping for alternative explanations that would validate their sabotage. Even if this company is real, the contract could still be fraudulent. Linda suggested, her desperation becoming more apparent. "Identity theft is very sophisticated these days. Someone could be impersonating this publisher to steal your personal information." The suggestion was so far-fetched that Jessica finally spoke up with the kind of practical assessment that had made her successful in business. "Mom, this is getting ridiculous. Harry has a real contract with a real publisher. We need to accept that we might have been wrong about his writing career." Bob turned on Jessica with surprising anger, apparently viewing her rational assessment as betrayal of family solidarity. "Don't tell me you're falling for this nonsense too. We're trying to protect your brother from making a life-destroying mistake, and you're undermining our efforts." "I'm not undermining anything," Jessica replied, her voice taking on the firm tone she used with difficult customers. "I'm pointing out that our assumptions about Harry's writing might have been incorrect. This contract looks legitimate, and maybe we should be celebrating instead of trying to prove it's fake." The admission that I might have been right about my career prospects created visible distress for my parents. Their identity as wise protectors who saved their son from disaster was crumbling, replaced by the uncomfortable reality that they had sabotaged genuine success. Linda tried one final emotional appeal, her voice breaking with what appeared to be genuine distress. "Harry, sweetheart, even if this opportunity is real, writing is such an uncertain career. What happens if your books don't sell? What happens if the publisher drops you after one book? We just want you to have security and stability." The concern might have been touching if it hadn't come immediately after they had deleted 4 years of my work and threatened to make me homeless for pursuing my dreams. Their sudden interest in my welfare felt like manipulation designed to maintain control rather than genuine love for my happiness. The contract includes guaranteed advance payments that total more than most people earn in 3 years. I explained, trying to keep my voice patient despite my anger. "This isn't uncertainty. It's the most financial security I've ever had in my life." Bob's final attempt at maintaining authority involved questioning my competence to make major life decisions. "You're 28 years old with no experience in contract negotiations or business dealings. How do you know you're not signing away rights that could be worth millions if your books become successful?" Marcus had been silent during most of the confrontation, but Bob's condescension finally prompted him to speak up. "Harry has professional representation by a respected literary agent who specializes in publishing contracts. Sarah Martinez has been negotiating these deals for over a decade. She's protecting his interests far better than family members who tried to sabotage his career." The blunt assessment hit my parents like cold water, forcing them to confront the reality of their behavior from an outsider's perspective. They had presented themselves as loving protectors, but an objective observer saw them as obstacles to their son's success. "We were trying to prevent him from getting hurt," Linda said weakly, her justification sounding hollow even to herself. "You deleted his manuscript 3 hours before the most important meeting of his life." Marcus replied, his voice carrying the kind of professional authority that my parents couldn't dismiss. "That's not protection. That's sabotage." The conversation had reached a turning point where my parents could no longer maintain their narrative of wise intervention. The evidence of their mistake was overwhelming, and continued denial would require abandoning all connection to reality. Bob sat in silence for several minutes, staring at the contract in his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice carried defeat rather than anger. "I don't understand how this happened. We thought we were helping." "You were trying to control me," I said, finally voicing the truth that had been obvious to everyone except my parents. "You couldn't accept that I might succeed in a career you didn't understand, so you decided to destroy my work rather than admit you were wrong about my potential." The accusation created uncomfortable silence as my parents struggled with the implications of their behavior. They had convinced themselves that love justified sabotage, but external perspective revealed their actions as selfish and destructive. Jessica broke the silence with an observation that surprised everyone in the room. "Harry, I owe you an apology. I've been resenting you for not being financially successful, but I didn't realize you actually were building a real career. I've been jealous of the freedom you had to pursue your dreams, while I felt pressured to be the responsible child." Her honesty opened a door for genuine family healing that had seemed impossible an hour earlier. The recognition that we had all been trapped by roles and expectations that limited our authentic selves created space for more honest relationships. "I don't need apologies," I said, surprised by my own lack of bitterness. "I need acknowledgement that I'm an adult capable of making my own decisions about my career and my life." Bob nodded slowly, the gesture carrying more weight than any verbal apology could have provided. "You're right. We overstepped our boundaries and we damaged something important to you. I don't know how to fix what we've done." The admission represented a breakthrough that I hadn't expected. My parents were finally seeing their behavior from my perspective, recognizing the harm they had caused while trying to help. The road to rebuilding our relationship would be long and difficult, but at least we were starting from a foundation of honesty. The weeks following my contract signing transformed every aspect of my life in ways that felt both surreal and completely natural. The first advance payment of $50,000 arrived 10 days after my meeting with Thomas Caldwell, deposited into my checking account like proof that dreams could indeed become tangible reality. Quitting my retail job at Target was one of the most satisfying moments of my adult life. My manager, who had frequently criticized my attitude problems and lack of commitment to company values, struggled to process my resignation letter that cited pursuing full-time writing career with major publishing house. The same creativity that he had viewed as a liability was now generating more income than his annual salary. Finding an apartment took 2 weeks of searching through Denver's competitive rental market, but I finally secured a one-bedroom unit in Capitol Hill that felt like a palace compared to my childhood bedroom. The space included a dedicated office where I could write without interruption, symbolic of my transition from secret morning sessions to professional daily practice. My relationship with my parents required careful reconstruction that began with Bob returning my savings account money with interest and a written apology for accessing my funds without permission. Linda volunteered to help me furnish my new apartment, her way of acknowledging that my independence was permanent rather than a temporary rebellion. She could wait out. The most challenging family healing involved Jessica, whose confession about her own financial struggles had revealed depths of dysfunction that extended far beyond my writing career. Her Mary Kay business was indeed failing with inventory debt that threatened her marriage and credit rating. The image of success that had been used to shame me for years was largely fabricated, maintained through credit cards and family loans that she had hidden from everyone. "I've been living in terror that someone would discover I wasn't really successful," Jessica admitted during one of our coffee shop conversations. "When Mom and Dad kept comparing you to me, I felt like I had to maintain this perfect image while secretly falling apart." Her honesty helped me understand that we had both been trapped by family expectations, though in different ways. She had been pressured to be the responsible success story, while I had been dismissed as the irresponsible failure. Neither role allowed us to be authentic or supportive of each other's real struggles and achievements. I used part of my advance payment to help Jessica restructure her business debt, not as charity, but as investment in genuine family healing. We worked together to develop a realistic financial plan that acknowledged her actual situation rather than the fantasy she had been maintaining. The experience of collaborative problem-solving created a sibling relationship based on mutual support rather than competition. Bob's journey toward accepting my career took longer than Linda's partially, because his own failed musical ambitions made my success a painful reminder of what he had never achieved. He had played guitar in local bands during his 20s, harboring dreams of recording contracts that never materialized. Watching me succeed in creative fields forced him to confront his own abandoned dreams and the bitterness that had shaped his parenting approach. I think I've been jealous of your courage to keep pursuing something I gave up on," Bob admitted during one of our gradually improving conversations. "When you kept writing despite all the criticism, it reminded me that I had chosen safety over passion, and that made me angry in ways I didn't understand." His emotional honesty created space for genuine forgiveness that I hadn't thought possible during the darkest moments of our conflict. Understanding his perspective didn't excuse his sabotage, but it explained the psychological dynamics that had driven his destructive behavior. The publication timeline moved faster than I had expected. Thomas Caldwell's team at Pinnacle Publishing House prioritized Echoes in the Static for spring release with marketing support that included author interviews, book tour opportunities, and promotional materials that made my name look important in bold print. Sarah Martinez proved invaluable during the transition from unknown writer to published author. She negotiated subsidiary rights deals, managed media requests, and provided guidance on building a sustainable writing career that could support long-term financial stability. Her 15 years of industry experience protected me from rookie mistakes that could have damaged my reputation or earning potential. The most surreal moment came when I received advance copies of my novel from the publisher. Holding my own book with my name on the cover and my words printed on professional quality paper felt like touching proof that impossible things could become real through persistence and refusal to accept other people's limitations. Pre-orders exceeded Pinnacle's expectations, generating industry attention that translated into additional promotional opportunities. Echoes in the Static received starred reviews from Publishers Weekly and Library Journal, with critics praising the authentic portrayal of family dysfunction and the psychological depth of the narrative structure. The book's success validated not just my individual efforts, but also the broader principle that creativity could generate legitimate financial returns when supported by professional expertise and persistent effort. My parents' fear that writing was inherently unprofitable had been proven wrong in the most concrete way possible. Marcus became my first official beta reader for the second book, providing feedback that improved the manuscript while maintaining the psychological authenticity that had made the first novel successful. Our friendship deepened through shared creative collaboration, and his graphic design business provided promotional materials that enhanced my author platform. 6 months after the contract signing, my family relationships had stabilized into a new normal that felt healthier than anything we had experienced during my childhood. Sunday dinners resumed, but with ground rules that respected my professional commitments and personal boundaries. My parents learned to discuss my career with pride rather than skepticism, and Jessica and I developed genuine mutual support rather than competitive comparison. The financial security provided by the publishing contract allowed me to help my parents in ways that felt generous rather than obligated. When Bob's car needed major repairs, I was able to contribute without the power dynamics that had complicated family financial relationships in the past. Linda's dental practice benefited from my connections in the local creative community, bringing new patients who valued artistic pursuits. The most meaningful validation came when other aspiring writers began reaching out for advice and encouragement. My story of family sabotage, followed by professional success, resonated with people who had experienced similar conflicts between creative dreams and family expectations. I started mentoring writers through online workshops and local literary organizations, creating the kind of support system I had wished for during my own struggles. Echoes in the Static spent 12 weeks on regional bestseller lists and generated enough sales to trigger bonus payments beyond the original advance. Thomas Caldwell expressed enthusiasm for the second book, which was already taking shape as an exploration of workplace dysfunction with the same psychological depth that had made the first novel successful. The movie rights generated interest from 3 production companies, leading to an option deal that provided additional income, and the surreal possibility that my characters might someday be portrayed by professional actors on screen. Sarah negotiated terms that protected my creative input while maximizing financial returns from any adaptation. Looking back on the morning when my parents deleted my manuscript, I realized that their sabotage had inadvertently strengthened my commitment to writing by forcing me to choose between their approval and my authentic self. The crisis had clarified my priorities in ways that gradual encouragement might not have achieved. The deeper life lesson involved understanding that family love sometimes becomes control when parents fear their children's choices will lead to pain or failure. My parents' destructive behavior emerged from genuine concern, mixed with their own unresolved disappointments and fears about financial security. Healing required acknowledging their motivations while maintaining firm boundaries about my autonomy as an adult. The experience taught me that professional success could coexist with family relationships, but only when those relationships were based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical control. My parents had to learn to trust my judgment about my own life, while I had to learn to forgive their mistakes without allowing past hurt to poison future interactions. The transformation from struggling retail worker to published author happened gradually, then suddenly, like sunrise creeping across a landscape, before exploding into full daylight. The 4 years of 5 a.m. writing sessions had prepared me for success, but I hadn't been prepared for the way achievement would change, not just my bank account, but my entire sense of identity and possibility. As I write this conclusion, sitting in my home office with advance copies of my second book stacked on my desk and contracts for the third book under review, I'm reminded that the most important victory wasn't financial or professional recognition. The real triumph was claiming my right to pursue dreams that other people didn't understand, maintaining hope when external circumstances suggested my efforts were futile, and refusing to accept other people's limitations as my own destiny. The publishing contract validated 4 years of work, but more importantly, it validated the principle that persistence and authentic effort could overcome family dysfunction, financial pressure, and social expectations that discouraged creative risk-taking. My parents' attempt to force me into conventional success had backfired completely, resulting in exactly the kind of achievement they claimed was impossible. The story doesn't end with the book deal, of course. Writing careers require ongoing effort, creative growth, and adaptation to changing market conditions. But the foundation is solid, now built on professional relationships, proven sales performance, and the kind of financial stability that allows me to focus on craft rather than survival. I often wonder what would have happened if my parents hadn't deleted my manuscript that morning. Would I have been as prepared for the publisher meeting? Would I have felt as committed to my independence? Would the success have felt as meaningful without the contrast of family opposition? The counterfactual questions are impossible to answer, but I suspect that crisis sometimes forces growth that comfort never could. My advice to other writers facing family pressure to abandon creative dreams is simple but not easy. Trust your own assessment of your work's value, seek professional validation rather than family approval, and remember that people who love you can still be wrong about your potential. Sometimes the greatest gift parents can give their children is learning when to step back and trust the adults their children have become. The morning my parents tried to delete my dreams, they accidentally taught me the most important lesson of my life. That authentic success requires claiming your identity, despite other people's fears, maintaining hope, despite external evidence that dreams are impractical, and pursuing excellence even when the people who raised you believe you're destined for failure. 4 years of 5 a.m. writing sessions led to this moment, but the real journey was learning to believe in myself when no one else would, maintaining discipline when external rewards seemed impossible, and refusing to let other people's limitations become my own reality. The book you hold in your hands, whether physical copy or digital version, represents proof that dreams can survive sabotage, that families can heal from dysfunction, and that persistence can transform impossible goals into inevitable success. The story of how my parents tried to delete my novel became the story of how I learned to write my own life one word at a time until the narrative became strong enough to withstand any attempt at erasure. Have you ever had family members try to discourage your dreams because they were afraid of seeing you fail? How did you handle the conflict between pursuing your passions and maintaining family relationships? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with your own experiences, please like this video to help other aspiring writers find encouragement. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming obstacles to achieve creative success, and share this with anyone who might need reminding that dreams are worth fighting for, even when the people who love you can't see their value. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it inspires you to keep pursuing whatever sets your soul on fire, regardless of who believes it's possible.